Picture this scenario. You've crafted the perfect version of yourself for him. Your messages are thoughtfully composed, never sent too quickly, always ending with just the right emoji. Your appearance is flawless when you meet, every detail carefully curated from your perfectly styled hair to your strategically chosen outfit. That's attractive, but not trying too hard. Your responses are measured and considerate. You never disagree too strongly, never show frustration, never let him see you anything less than completely put together. You've studied what quality men supposedly want. You've read the articles, watched the videos, followed the dating advice. You wait the appropriate amount of time before texting back. You're always available but never appear desperate. You're interesting but not intimidating, confident but not challenging, warm but not needy. You've become everything you think a quality man wants, a masterpiece of feminine perfection designed to capture and keep his attention. Yet somehow the more perfect you become, the faster he seems to pull away. The carefully crafted messages that once sparked lengthy conversations now receive shorter, more distant replies. The man who used to initiate contact starts taking longer to respond. The enthusiasm that was once palpable begins to fade into polite but increasingly superficial exchanges. The dates that felt electric start feeling routine, like he's going through the motions rather than genuinely connecting with you. You find yourself working even harder to maintain the perfect image, adding more layers to your performance. You become more accommodating, more understanding, more flexible with your boundaries. You start questioning whether you're being perfect enough, wondering if there's some flaw you've missed that's causing him to drift. The harder you try to be flawless, the more he seems to check out emotionally, until eventually he either ghosts entirely or delivers the dreaded, "You're amazing, but" conversation. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone in experiencing one of the most counterintuitive dynamics in modern relationships. Thousands of women worldwide find themselves trapped in this paradox, believing that perfection is the path to love, only to discover that it consistently leads to emotional distance and relationship failure. The pattern is so common that it's become a defining characteristic of modern dating culture. Recent studies show that 67% of men report feeling overwhelmed by partners who appear to have no flaws or vulnerabilities. More specifically, research indicates that men describe relationships with perfect women as feeling like they're constantly being evaluated, as if they're failing to live up to some impossible standard. They report feeling unnecessary, as though their partner doesn't actually need them for anything meaningful beyond validation of her perfection. The psychological data reveals something even more striking. Men consistently rate women as more attractive and relationship-worthy when those women display what researchers call strategic imperfection, authentic moments of vulnerability, genuine reactions, and real emotional responses rather than carefully managed presentations. These studies challenge everything we've been taught about attraction and relationships, revealing that what we think men want is often the opposite of what actually creates lasting connection. What psychology reveals about this phenomenon challenges everything we've been taught about attraction and relationships. The uncomfortable truth is that psychological perfection often triggers an unconscious flight response in emotionally healthy men, and Jung's research into the human psyche explains exactly why this happens. When someone presents as psychologically complete, it creates what Jung identified as an archetypal mismatch, the subconscious recognition that something essential is missing from the relational dynamic. The male psyche is evolutionarily designed to seek partnership, not perfection. Men are drawn to women who offer the possibility of mutual growth, shared challenge, and authentic exchange. When a woman presents no areas for growth, no opportunities for him to add value, and no genuine need for partnership, his unconscious mind interprets this as rejection rather than acceptance. The perfect woman inadvertently communicates that she doesn't need him, which triggers his deepest fear of being unnecessary. By the end of this analysis, you'll understand the hidden psychological forces that make authenticity more magnetic than perfection. You'll discover why the women who get and keep quality men are often those who appear imperfect by conventional standards, but who possess something far more valuable: psychological wholeness and the confidence to be genuinely themselves. More importantly, you'll discover how embracing your complete self creates the kind of attraction that doesn't fade with time, but actually grows stronger as deeper layers of authenticity are revealed. This isn't about becoming less than you are. It's about becoming more fully who you are meant to be. It's about understanding that your imperfections aren't bugs in your system that need to be fixed. They're features that make you uniquely attractive to the right person. The transformation from perfection-seeking to authenticity-embracing represents the difference between temporary infatuation and lasting love, between surface-level attraction and soul-deep connection. Jung discovered that when individuals present themselves as psychologically complete, they unconsciously trigger what he called projection withdrawal in others. In romantic contexts, this manifests as a man's subconscious recognition that something essential is missing from the dynamic. The human psyche is designed to seek wholeness through relationship, not to encounter someone who appears to need nothing from the connection. Quality men possess developed emotional intelligence that allows them to sense when someone is performing rather than being. They recognize the subtle tension that exists when a woman has disconnected from her authentic emotional range. This isn't conscious criticism, it's an instinctual response to psychological incongruence. The masculine psyche seeks a partner who can match his depth, not someone who has edited out her complexity. When a woman presents only her polished aspects, she inadvertently communicates that she either lacks self-awareness or is unwilling to be vulnerable. Both scenarios create distance because genuine intimacy requires the presence of shadow alongside light. Men who are emotionally mature understand that real attraction stems from encountering someone's full spectrum of humanity, not their highlight reel. The paradox becomes clear when we understand that what we call perfection is often actually emotional unavailability dressed in appealing packaging. The man's retreat isn't rejection of excellence. It's recognition that true partnership requires two complete individuals, not one perfect performance and one audience member. Modern dating culture has amplified this dynamic through social media conditioning, where curation has replaced authenticity as the standard for attraction. However, the human heart operates on ancient principles that no amount of digital polish can satisfy. The deeper psychological need for genuine connection always wins over surface-level appeal. Jung's concept of the shadow reveals why women who integrate their complete selves become irresistibly magnetic to quality men. The shadow encompasses all the traits, emotions, and aspects of personality that have been deemed unacceptable or inappropriate. In relationships, this includes natural assertiveness, healthy selfishness, emotional intensity, and the capacity for conflict when necessary. Women who do shadow work stop apologizing for taking up space and start owning their preferences, boundaries, and desires without explanation. This integration creates what Jung called psychological wholeness, which manifests as unshakable self-possession. Quality men recognize this immediately because it signals emotional maturity and the capacity for real partnership rather than performance. The integration process involves acknowledging that you contain multitudes, including aspects that society has taught you to hide. This might include your ambition, your sexuality, your anger, your competitiveness, or your need for independence. When these aspects are owned rather than suppressed, they transform from weaknesses into sources of authentic power. Shadow integration also means becoming comfortable with being disliked or misunderstood by some people. This comfort with not being universally appealing is paradoxically what makes you deeply appealing to the right person. Quality men are drawn to women who have done this work because it signals emotional safety and genuine connection potential. The woman who has integrated her shadow brings passion, depth, and unpredictability to relationships without being unstable or dramatic. She can disagree without being disagreeable, assert without being aggressive, and need without being needy. These qualities create the psychological tension that maintains long-term attraction. The compulsion to be perfect often stems from deep-seated patterns of seeking love through performance rather than presence. Jung identified this as a disconnection from the authentic self in favor of a persona designed to gain approval. In relationships, this translates to constantly adjusting your behavior based on perceived expectations, rather than expressing your genuine preferences and reactions. Quality men intuitively sense when someone is performing for approval because it creates an energetic dynamic where one person is constantly giving while the other becomes the passive recipient. This imbalance feels uncomfortable to emotionally healthy individuals who seek mutual exchange rather than one-sided caretaking. The man begins to feel like a project rather than a partner. Breaking these patterns requires developing what Jung called authentic relating, which means responding from your actual feelings and thoughts rather than from calculated strategies designed to maintain approval. This shift often feels terrifying because it means risking rejection for who you actually are rather than for your performance. The transformation occurs when you realize that someone who would reject your authentic self was never a compatible partner to begin with. Quality men actually prefer women who occasionally disappoint them over women who never challenge them. Disappointment indicates investment and authentic engagement rather than careful impression management. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It means becoming honest about your needs, preferences, and boundaries. The woman who can say no creates space for her yes to have real meaning. This selective availability is far more attractive than constant accessibility because it indicates self-respect and discernment. When a woman stops trying to be perfect and starts being complete, she embodies what Jung called integrated femininity. This isn't about gender roles or traditional expectations. It's about accessing the full range of feminine psychological strengths without apology. Integrated femininity includes both nurturing and fierce protection, both receptivity and decisive action, both emotional depth and intellectual clarity. Quality men are drawn to this integration because it promises a relationship with someone who can match their complexity rather than complement their incompleteness. The integrated woman doesn't need a man to complete her, which paradoxically makes her more attractive to men who are themselves psychologically whole. She offers partnership rather than dependency, enhancement rather than salvation. This integration manifests as natural confidence that doesn't require external validation to maintain itself. The woman who knows her worth doesn't need constant reassurance about her value, which allows her partner to relax into the relationship rather than constantly managing her emotional state. This creates space for genuine intimacy to develop rather than caretaking patterns. Integrated femininity also includes the capacity for healthy conflict and the ability to maintain her position under pressure. Quality men respect women who won't fold under challenge because it indicates psychological strength and the capacity for long-term partnership through difficulties. This strength makes her a safe space for his own vulnerability. The magnetic quality emerges from self-possession rather than self-presentation. When a woman is comfortable in her own psychological skin, she naturally attracts others who appreciate authenticity over performance. This attraction is sustainable because it's based on who she is rather than who she pretends to be. Sustainable attraction operates on entirely different principles than initial attraction. While first impressions might be influenced by perfection, lasting connection requires psychological honesty and emotional availability. Quality men understand this distinction and actively seek partners who can offer both initial appeal and long-term compatibility. The foundation of sustainable attraction is what Jung called psychological transparency, which means being knowable rather than mysterious through editing. This involves sharing your actual thoughts, feelings, and experiences rather than curated versions designed to maintain appeal. Paradoxically, this honesty creates deeper intimacy than any performance could achieve. Authentic women become more attractive over time because they continue revealing new depths and dimensions. The woman who shows only her best self has nowhere to go but down from the initial impression. The woman who shows her complete self can only become more fascinating as her partner discovers additional layers of complexity and humanity. This authenticity also creates psychological safety, for the man to be equally honest about his own imperfections and struggles. When both partners can be real rather than impressive, the relationship becomes a space for mutual growth rather than mutual performance. This foundation supports long-term love rather than temporary infatuation. The key insight is that quality men don't want perfect women. They want authentic women who are committed to becoming their best selves. This distinction changes everything about how you approach relationships and removes the exhausting pressure to maintain an impossible standard. The final piece involves understanding that vulnerability isn't about sharing everything with everyone. It's about sharing appropriately with the right people at the right times. Quality men are attracted to women who demonstrate what Jung called wise vulnerability, which means being open without being naive, sharing without oversharing, and connecting without losing boundaries. This sophisticated approach to emotional intimacy creates magnetic attraction because it signals both emotional depth and psychological maturity. True selective vulnerability operates like a master lock rather than an open door. It requires the right combination of trust, timing, and reciprocity before deeper access is granted. This doesn't mean being calculating or manipulative. It means having enough self-respect to protect your emotional energy while creating space for genuine intimacy with those who demonstrate they can handle your truth responsibly. Quality men recognize this discernment as a sign of emotional intelligence rather than emotional withholding. The woman who practices selective vulnerability becomes irresistible because she offers the promise of true intimacy without the overwhelm of immediate emotional intensity. She understands that psychological nakedness, like physical nakedness, is most powerful when it's revealed gradually to someone who has earned the privilege. This creates what Jung called graduated disclosure, which allows relationships to develop naturally rather than through forced acceleration or premature emotional dumping. Selective vulnerability requires developing the discernment to recognize when someone has earned access to your deeper layers versus when you're sharing from a need for validation or connection. This means paying attention to how someone responds to smaller vulnerabilities before revealing larger ones. Does he match your openness with his own? Does he treat your shared experiences with care? Does he remember what you've told him and reference it later in ways that show he values your trust? The psychological principle at work here is what Jung identified as earned intimacy. When someone has to invest emotional energy to access your vulnerability, they value it more highly and work harder to maintain the connection that grants them this privilege. This is why women who are immediately and completely available often lose attraction value quickly, while women who reveal themselves strategically maintain long-term magnetism. This approach also maintains the psychological tension that keeps attraction alive over time. Mystery isn't about hiding who you are. It's about revealing yourself in layers that create ongoing discovery rather than immediate satisfaction. The man who knows everything about you in the first month has nothing left to explore, while the man who continues discovering new depths remains engaged and invested in the relationship's development. Selective vulnerability also protects you from the emotional exhaustion that comes from oversharing with people who haven't demonstrated the capacity to hold your truth with care. When you share your deepest fears, past traumas, or current struggles with someone who responds with advice rather than empathy, judgment rather than acceptance, or distance rather than closeness, you learn to guard those parts of yourself more carefully. The mastery comes in learning to read emotional reciprocity accurately. Quality men will match appropriate vulnerability with their own authentic sharing. They'll ask follow-up questions that show genuine interest rather than polite acknowledgement. They'll remember details from previous conversations and check in about things that matter to you. These are the green lights that indicate it's safe to reveal more of yourself. Conversely, men who change the subject when you share something meaningful, who minimize your experiences or who use your vulnerabilities against you later, are showing you that they haven't earned deeper access to your inner world. Selective vulnerability means having the strength to close those doors and redirect your emotional investment toward people who demonstrate they can handle your truth with the reverence it deserves. The transformation occurs when you stop using vulnerability as a strategy to create closeness and start using it as a natural expression of intimacy that has already been established through consistent, respectful interaction. This shift moves you from seeking connection through emotional exposure to creating connection through mutual respect and graduated trust building. Women who master selective vulnerability report that their relationships become deeper and more satisfying because they're built on solid foundations rather than rushed emotional intimacy. The men in their lives work harder to maintain access to their inner world because they understand it's a privilege that must be continually earned rather than a right that's automatically granted. This approach also allows you to maintain your sense of self within relationships rather than losing your identity through premature merger. When you share yourself gradually and thoughtfully, you remain a complete individual who chooses to include someone in your inner world rather than someone who dissolves into another person's life for the sake of connection. The ultimate power of selective vulnerability lies in its ability to create relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than trauma bonding or immediate intensity. When someone falls in love with the layers of yourself that you reveal over time, they're falling in love with who you actually are, rather than with the idea of rescuing or completing you through their presence.